Welcome to the Catastrophic Comeback Podcast with American injury lawyer Clark Speaks, helping you find hope, purpose, and joy after a catastrophic injury.
Hi, and welcome to Catastrophic Comeback. I'm happy to have Jeff Watson, Senior Managing Attorney at Speaks Law Firm, here joining us today. And Jeff and I are going to talk about the litigation process and what might be involved in the legal recovery for catastrophic injuries. Welcome, Jeff. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, Jeff, the first thing I want to talk to you about is, not everyone who has had a catastrophic event in their lives is necessarily entitled to legal recovery. Talk to me about who might be in a position to recover financially, make a legal claim for monetary damages after a catastrophic, injury.
Sure. Bad things happen and to good people, and sometimes there isn't a way to recover. For example, if I'm, using a chainsaw in my backyard, cutting up some wood, and it pops back and cuts my arm off or something like that, then there's nobody else responsible for that. That's just me. I mean, I did that on my own. There's no case to be made against somebody else for that type of situation. Sometimes people get diseases or, catastrophic things that just, are terrible, but there's nobody else responsible for that, a cancer diagnosis or heart disease or things like that.
Somebody falls at their own house.
Yeah, exactly. And
somebody, it's a wild animal that attacks them. So they have some kind of, they're driving a car and it's their fault and they have a collision and they, under those circumstances, there might not be a recovery.
Yeah, I mean, what we're looking for, to be able to help people are situations where someone else is responsible for their injury. Someone else hits them in a car wreck. Someone else has, a pit bull that they don't have chained up and they come next door and attack somebody's children. We see all these types of situations. Now, it's a little different with workers' comp because in workers' compensation cases, there may not be a case where somebody else is responsible. It may just be that this person gets hurt at work while they're doing their job. And if that happens, they would have a workers' compensation case against their employer. So there's third-party cases where someone else is responsible, and then there's work injuries where maybe nobody else is responsible. It's just an injury at work. And then sometimes there's both, where people get injured at work and somebody else is responsible.
So essentially, there are two main sources of recovery for people who've suffered catastrophic injuries. One would be workers' comp, where people are injured on the job, and another would be third-party liability. That's traditional tort law, which is negligence. Somebody, duty, breach of duty, causation, damages. Talk to me a little bit about what that means, duty, breach of duty, causation, damages, and how that applies in this situation.
Well, duty is obviously somebody's got some duty to you, and they don't do what they're supposed to do. Either they do something that they weren't supposed to do, or they don't do something that they were supposed to do.
Give me a couple of examples, please.
Well, so if I'm driving in my car and somebody runs the red light and hits my car, they've got a duty to stop at that red light. And they didn't do that. They ran through that. That's a duty. That's a breach of duty. That wreck caused my injuries. That's the causation part of it. And then the damages are how was I injured and medical bills and other things.
What's another example of a breach of duty? Maybe in a dog bite case, or somebody slips and is hurt seriously at a business.
Well, it could be that if you have somebody that slips in a restaurant, for example, they're walking by the kitchen door and there's grease on the floor. They slip on that floor, and there was no mat down there. And there are standards that say in these type of situations you're supposed to have a mat, or you're supposed to clean them. There's different duties that you would have there as a restaurant to ensure the safety of your patrons. And if they aren't doing those duties and that failure causes an injury, then that's a case that person can get recovery from the restaurant for not doing the things they're supposed to do.
What about in a situation of an animal attack, something like that?
It would be a situation where somebody hasn't chained up an animal that they're supposed to, or
taking the adequate precautions.
Somehow secured them or whatever. Yeah, and that animal gets loose, and we've had cases where I remember one case where a guy was working in his garage fixing his car, and he's got his garage door open, and he looks up and there's 3 Dobermans standing at the entryway of the thing, and he can't get out. He's trapped, and they just come after him. There's situations like that. We see it with children get bitten. Now it's different. If you have a dog and it bites you, no one else is responsible for that. But if you have a dog and it goes and bites somebody else because it wasn't properly secured, that's a case of somebody being at fault because they haven't done the duties they're supposed to do.
So you talked about liability. Talk to me a little bit about the work injuries and how those might be compensable.
Yeah. So anytime somebody's injured at work, they theoretically would have a workers' compensation claim. Not all of those claims are, necessarily worth hiring a lawyer. They may be very small things that, it just isn't worth the time to engage a lawyer. And a lawyer will tell you that. You want to take those to a lawyer and have them examine those things and tell you whether they think this is something you can handle on your own or something you need a lawyer for. It can get complicated. So a lot of those cases where people are seriously injured at work, they need to get a lawyer involved.
All right, Jeff, talk to me please about the a combination case, a case where it's both a workers' compensation case and what types of scenarios might those arise? And a workers' compensation case and an ordinary third-party liability case.
We see 2 types of situations a lot. One is where someone's working in a factory, they're doing their job, and they get injured. That injury occurs while they're at work, so there's a workers' compensation claim, but it also occurs because of the fault of somebody else. I'm working in a factory, and someone's operating a bulldozer, and they drop something off the bulldozer onto my foot and break multiple bones in my foot. That's the fault of whoever was operating that that forklift, that bulldozer. Typically in workers' compensation, if you're injured and it's the fault of your own employer, your recovery is generally just workers' compensation. There are a couple of exceptions to that, but generally you can't sue your employer if you've got workers' compensation. That's kind of your exclusive remedy as a general rule. But you'd want to consult a lawyer to see if those exceptions apply. But if you're working at a factory and let's say there's some other company, a subcontractor that's operating that bulldozer, and they hurt me, then we've got somebody that's not my employer that's at fault. So I've had an injury at work, it's a workers' compensation claim. I've got a third party, not my employer, who has injured me. Now I have a case against that third party. That's a liability claim. That's duty, breach of duty, causation, and damages. The other scenario we see is in automobiles. I'm working as a salesperson. I'm driving my car to a sales appointment. Someone reds a red light and hits me. I'm working. I'm in my car, but I'm working. So that's a workers' compensation claim, but yet I have a third party who's caused that injury. Now I've got a claim against that third party as well.
So let's talk about that for a second. So in a case where a person is injured in a wreck, and it's somebody else's fault, there's always a ordinary negligence, personal injury law, negligence, tort. That's a possible source of recovery. People have car insurance, so if you've got a injury and fault and an insurance policy, then you've got a case, right?
Right.
And that's the third party that you're talking about.
That's right.
And then there's workers' comp, where if you're working at the time of that wreck, of that automobile accident, then you may have another source of recovery against or with your employer, you know. So I think that's an important distinction. The reason it's called a third party is because generally the relationship is between you and your employer, and if there's somebody else at fault, that's a third party outside of this primary relationship. Is that right?
That's correct. And, you know, there are nuances to this that get complicated where you'd want to consult a lawyer. You know, if I'm on lunch break, I'm not working, I'm just driving to a restaurant to get something to eat, and someone runs a red light and hits me, that may not be a workers' comp case because I'm not working at the time. You know, or if I'm going to work, or I'm coming from work, or when have I clocked out? There's a lot of nuances there that gets complicated, and you want to make sure you're consulting an attorney that can tell you the difference in those things.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. In the next episode, we're going to talk about specific examples of cases that involve both workers' compensation and third-party liability. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.